huge win for UCLA.
Kentucky ran into a buzzsaw. Let's just be honest.
Trading for Myles Garrett or Cooper Kupp, just how close are the Packers to the Philadelphia Eagles?
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the Big 6 in 60. The 6 biggest national sports stories from the local experts of the Locked On Podcast Network. Get the real story, why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 60 minutes. The Big 6 in 60 starts now with the biggest story in sports.
Boston Celtics get a big-time playoff-type win. Celtics get the win, 112-105. They go up by 20 early. They never trail after the 5:50 mark of the first quarter. It was a little dicey sometimes after that, but they took the big lead. They held on to the lead throughout, and so the basic takeaway right away is, hey, great, perfect, not perfect, but perfect for a regular season game. This is the consistent effort. It was a playoff type feel to the game. Intense. Both teams were bringing it. The defense early on, it was like 6-4 halfway through the first quarter. That was an intense defensive game to start. Some bad luck shooting for both teams, but all in all, it's the type of performance that you want to see from the Boston Celtics. And Kristaps Porzingis said it after the game. He went on a whole long thing. I don't have the exact quote, but to paraphrase him, he said, they're working on bringing the intensity more often, but this is the time of year where the intensity, it's not always going to be there. But for a game like this, they're up for it. And I think that this shows, like, when we have these conversations, when I talk about the Celtics, in terms of, they'll be fine. This isn't the biggest deal in the world. And I can see the comments, on the YouTube page. I can see the comments on Boston Sports Journal. People are like, yeah, but they don't look like a team that's going to win. They don't look like this. They don't look like that. And I keep telling you, this type of thing happens all the time. Most champions have a stretch of the season where it's like, well, they don't look like a team that's going to win a championship. Most teams go through a stretch where it's like, okay, not great. This was not great. They're playing down to the competition. They're not taking this as seriously. When you can knock out every opponent, sometimes you either come out like a little cocky or a little lazy, and you feel like, I'm just going to kind of like loaf my way through this, and I'll just throw the knockout punch later. And sometimes you get knocked out, and it's like, oh, damn, that's not how I wanted it to go. But when the opponent is capable of knocking you out, you're like, oh, okay, this is the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is the top seed. All right, let's go. Let's bring that effort. And they did. So I liked the way they were playing defense. I liked the way they were running things. Even when they weren't hitting shots, I thought the effort was pretty consistent. Yeah, there was a little bit of a slip in the third quarter where they started to get a little stagnant. And I don't think that was an effort thing. I think that was just they just weren't running their stuff the same way. And when they started to defend a little bit better and get the rebounds, they had little stretches where they had lapses. Like, no team's going to be perfect for 48 minutes. And they had some like lapses where Jared Allen would come in. He had 18 rebounds. 6 of them were offensive rebounds. It was, little pockets of like, okay. And give the Cavs like their due, their credit. The reason why the runs were made is because they're the Cavs. It's because they've got 3 all-stars. Donovan Mitchell is good. Darius Garland is good. Evan Mobley is good. Like, those guys are all good players. Jared Allen, their role players are good. So as much as, people want to say, oh, the Celtics started to go through their same stuff in the fourth quarter, like, maybe a little bit, but also the Cavs being as good as they are puts a little pressure on you. And no team is going to withstand, a run like they're not. No team's going to go against a team as good as the Cavs and just kind of like run wire to wire like all the time. It's generally going to look like, I mean, every once in a while it happens, but like we've seen the Cavs make OKC look bad. We've seen OKC make the Cavs look bad. It just happens. It comes and goes. Sometimes it stretches over a game. Sometimes it's quarter to quarter. But my point is the Cavs put pressure on teams when they're playing well, and they had stretches where they were playing pretty well and they had their defense like ramped up too, and they went on their runs. So I do not want to make like the fourth quarter or the third quarter where the Celtics gave up 31 and 30 points. I don't want to make it just about, wow, the Celtics didn't do this, this, and this. It's also hard to stop the Cavs for 48 minutes. And the Celtics had a 28-15 first quarter. The Cavs came out super, super cold. The Celtics took advantage of that. Their defense was really good. Their rebounding was really good in the first quarter. Obviously, when the other team shoots 6 of 26 in the first quarter, there are tons of rebounds for you to go get. And the Celtics, I thought, rebounded well. I was really focused on the Celtics crashing the boards, and they did do that in this game. They ended up with 15 offensive rebounds, 13 second chance points. The Cavs had 16 second chance points, but the point is the Celtics weren't decimated by it. So the Celtics did a good job on the boards. I thought they again, little pockets of not rebounding well, and that's how Jared Allen gets the 18 rebounds. But I thought they generally throughout this game, they rebounded pretty well. They defended pretty well. The effort was there from start to finish. And so it was different guys. Jaylen Brown was the guy in the first quarter, 12 points. For a while there, he alone was outscoring the Cavs. In fact, it was, like I said, the Celtics gave up 15 points in the first quarter. Jaylen had 12. So, it didn't take much. Al Horford at the end of the first quarter was huge, and that's why the Celtics were able to pull off a 13-point lead. But second quarter, it was like more Jason Tatum. Third quarter, it was Tatum and Porzingis. Fourth quarter, it was Derek White. So it was different guys, and that's the beauty of the Celtics. That's what the Celtics are. Each quarter can be a different guy's quarter, and when the defense is focused on somebody else, then a new guy comes, oh, we're going to stop Derek White. Okay, well, now it's Drew Holiday. And if you're going to stop Holiday, then it's this guy, it's that guy. And so every time the Cavs made their defensive decisions, the Celtics adjusted and went to whomever they needed to go to.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. How about a Broadway show? Can't wait to take my kids to Broadway. The energy, the excitement, it's unforgettable. Seeing live performers, it's the best. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Huge win for UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins.
UCLA knocks off a top 10 Michigan State team, giving them just their second loss of Big Ten play, 2 in a row, and changing the hierarchy in the Big Ten title race. All right. Michigan State falls to 18-4, 9-2 after they get swept on their LA West Coast road trip. UCLA now 17-6, 6 wins in a row, 8-4 in conference play. And oh, by the way, UCLA is currently 2 games out, creeping up the Big Ten standings, poking at maybe getting a top for outside chance at a top 3 Big Ten finish, but they're really making their case for a much better seed in the NCAA tournament. This win proves to me the Bruins are back after the Mick Cronin call-out. I was very tough on them. Mick Cronin was certainly tough on them, and they won this game. Now, let's kind of sit down before I get into the nitty-gritty with the stats. UCLA had to win this game. After USC beat Michigan State the other day, that just showcased the Spartans are vulnerable. And with them being on the West Coast, I wondered how, if they'd have their legs underneath them, it'd be a little chaotic. It should be an energetic crowd for UCLA on Tuesday, which it very much was at Pauley Pavilion. You have to win that game. When these Midwest teams come west, you have to hold serve at home, which made that Michigan game all the more devastating when they couldn't come back and win that game. For the large portion of this game, UCLA was winning by 8 to 10 points, holding on, and then Michigan State went on a run late, took the lead. It was back and forth the last 7 or so minutes, and then we got a big open 3 made by Stefanovic, some key defensive stops, and then the game winner by Eric Daly Jr., who by no stretch played well offensively. This is a tough matchup. Michigan State isn't overly big, but they're super athletic enough to have UCLA's secret weapon, Adamara, be ineffective. 6 points on 3 of 9 shooting. Most of the UCLA players missed 5 or more shots and did so inefficiently. All right, this could have very much been a very different game if it's in East Lansing on a neutral court, but it's not. And that still adds to the fact that USC has beat Illinois and beat Michigan State, and now they're on the bubble of the NCAA tournament. What does this do for UCLA standing, who now has their first top 10 win of the year, although Michigan State might fall out of the top 10 by the next time the poll comes out next week? That's a huge quad 1 win. UCLA got one over Oregon. They got one over Wisconsin. That's 3 quad 1 wins in a segment where I was hoping this team would go maybe 5-2 in their West Coast stint, right? The early home games against Iowa and Wisconsin, the 2 road games, and 3 straight home games. I was hoping, okay, they can go 5-2. That's a really good stretch. UCLA is 6-0 on the West Coast after having everything go against them on the East Coast. You got a streaking Maryland team, a scrappy Rutgers team. Everything was going against UCLA, and they had to respond. Well, in comes Iowa. Then came a scrappy, gutsy performance by Mata to come out of nowhere and dominate Wisconsin. They go up north, beat Washington without Bilodeau. They beat USC, who we saw beat Michigan State and dominated them for almost 30 to 35 minutes. And they come out, they're pretty much healthy, learning the rotations. Cronin kept it pretty short, leaning on his starting 5, not as much as we've seen in previous years, but leaned on them a bit more tonight, and UCLA got the job done. That's another close victory. UCLA has been very good in 1-possession games this year. Their only loss, I believe, was the North Carolina game. That was their biggest choke of the year. UCLA wins this game 63-61. Led by 7 at the break, led by 11 at some point in the second half. And all applause to Michigan State, right? This is the second game of a long, extended West Coast road trip, and they fought. And when UCLA's leading this game by double figures in the second half, when this team's coming west in front of a rockin' home crowd, this sets the tone for the rest of the season, right? You got Penn State. You still got a couple of home games left in the year. This is one that not only easily clinches the berth, that they haven't clinched one already. UCLA's creeping up the bracketology. What UCLA needs to go into a deep tournament run, even more so this year than in years previous, they must stay on the West Coast. You don't want to go east. You don't want to have to go to play to Providence in the first round game, right? You don't want to go to Rhode Island and go all the way across the country, another East Coast trip that adds to the miles that UCLA is going to log up on their next 2 trips, going to Illinois and Indiana, and then going to play Northwestern and Purdue. That's another top 10 team UCLA has yet to play, who is ahead of them in the Big Ten standings. That's on the road. So this is a huge win. You can't blow a double-digit lead in the second half against a team that's making a West Coast trip from East Lansing, Michigan, and the Bruins held serve and won. Typical Mick Cronin and Tom Izzo battle. Ugly offense, good defense. And you wonder, UCLA didn't shoot well. Michigan State didn't shoot that well either. And they still hit a couple of threes. They got the job done at the line, especially in the second half. And UCLA only turned it over 3 times. They forced a lot of Michigan State turnovers and got a great win. Absolutely huge win. even if Michigan State turns out to be overrated, I'm not sure if they really are, but they got a great win, huge win, best win of the year for UCLA in terms of marquee name value. Oregon slumping. Wisconsin hasn't done enough to creep into that top 15, top 10 just yet this year. Beating Michigan State solidifies UCLA's status, I think, as a contender. Now, if they go play on a court where there's more Michigan State fans, you play in a neutral court, you go play in East Lansing, things could be very different. You play them in the Big Ten tournament, Michigan State could probably win this game. But think, all right, they've each taken each other's best shot. UCLA won the game. That's what they need. I think the best path for UCLA, location-wise in the tournament, be a 4 or 5 seed, play the first round in Denver, be in the West Regional, which means then they could play if they go to a second weekend in San Francisco. It's not an easy bracket if you play as a 4 or 5 seed, but I think that's the best case scenario for UCLA, unless they win the rest of their games, which they won't. They go and creep closer to the West Regional, and you play your first round games in Denver, beat a scrappy mid-major, play a scrappy 4 or 5 seed, and then you get to take on a 1 seed in your Sweet 16. UCLA, with their 6 losses, that's what they're going to have to live with, considering they're going to take another 1 or 2. Even as good as they've played, these games coming up are going to be very tough. But a huge win for UCLA, who continues to display the clutch gene. Eric Daly Jr. in 21 minutes, 9 points, but the game winner. You see Sky Clark, who took a lot of shots. I like an aggressive Sky Clark. Didn't make them. Ended up with 14 points. I'm okay with that. Tyler Bilodeau. I didn't like the late game fadeaway for the win. I think you could get a better, closer to the shot, leaning to the hoop when Bilodeau and UCLA were going for the lead late in a tie game against Michigan State, but he did all right in a matchup that probably didn't favor many of the UCLA players. Most of these Bruins couldn't shoot that well. 7 of 28 for 3 isn't going to get it done. But when you shoot worse from 3, you shoot worse from the free throw line, you force more turnovers against Michigan State, you clog the lane, you even saw Mick Cronin bust out a zone. How often do the Bruins play a zone under Cronin? All right, hardly. Big time win in one of the worst games we've seen of extensive Adai this year, where he didn't shoot the ball as well. A couple of rebounds, a couple of assists, a couple of blocks, but it wasn't his most dominant performance. All right, maybe one of those matchups where those athletic, just undersized teams, but they have enough size for Michigan State, undersized compared to Adai, can do enough to throw off his rhythm. Now, speak about a clutch Lazar Stefanovic, 13 minutes, comes in 3 of 3, gets late minutes. Cronin trusts him. If the game's on the line and the guy's cold, Cronin is always going to trust Lazar Stefanovic. The UCLA down 1, wide open 3, Stefanovic is like, I'm going to bury this, and splashes that bad boy, right? Maybe last year he doesn't make that shot as a Bruin. This year, less pressure, less on him, wide open. He come in, score a crucial 8 points in a game where UCLA only had 2 players over double figures. Stefanovic was the only efficient Bruin if you include Sebastian Mack with a couple of shots. Stefanovic made all his shots. In a game where both teams couldn't make their threes, couldn't make their shots, UCLA's miniature secret weapon is their depth, because their 10th guy, 8th, whatever number you want to throw Stefanovic, can close games on the court defensively and offensively and make clutch buckets. That's why this team is better, because they don't need Stefanovic on minute 36 to hit that open 3 like they did last year, or as he probably needed to do in Utah. He can come in 13 minutes, be fresh, be wide open, no pressure in the world, even though the game's on the line, and bury a 3. Huge. Absolutely huge. The defense played up. UCLA got absolutely blasted on the glass. Not a positive sign, but they did just enough to win this game, and that's what they needed. A resume builder to once again shock those people making the bracketology, shock the national media to where UCLA should be in the top 25. Now, don't get me wrong. Penn State's no slouch. They're going to come in, and I think Penn State might come against UCLA and put up a 10-point lead. Shell shock the Bruins after a lot of energy, an extended layover or layoff prior to a home game on a Saturday afternoon, and then immediately into Illinois. This is a dangerous stretch for UCLA where they could easily lose 3 in a row again and still be just as qualified to go on a deep run in the tournament, in the Big Ten tournament, the NCAA tournament, because they've beaten some top-tier teams. They play good enough defense, and when teams play good enough defense, it's this ugly, low-scoring game. They've beaten the Arizonas, who would love another crack at them. Michigan State wants the same thing. But the Bruins have been really good at making late-game buckets by beating Arizona, by beating Oregon, by beating Wisconsin, doing the same thing against Michigan State, mostly in low-scoring games if you don't include that Wisconsin game. But the Bruins have established who they lean on in a certain matchup. Today, they leaned a lot on Bilodeau, Daly Jr., Clark, Andrews, Johnson. But when Stefanovic is making shots, he's going to give Stefanovic the shot over Kobe Johnson. It's a great win. It's great considering UCLA had 8 steals, kept the Spartans off their toes. Michigan State made sure UCLA could not score. And again, what was the line before? Like 2.5 pregame line? That's exactly how this game finished. Exactly how it finished. I don't see how UCLA is not ranked, even with a loss to Penn State. UCLA should be one of those teams that increases its stature, even if they lose to Penn State at home. That is my controversial take from this game. UCLA, with what they've done, has deserved to be in the top 25, even if they lose to Penn State. They should increase their seeding by a whole line and a half, whether they're pushing a top 6 seed or maybe a low 5, earning themselves either a closer West Coast matchup, maybe to Seattle in the first round, or playing in Denver, because the Bruins will desperately need it when they're going to go to Indiana 3 times in the span of a month. From now to the next month, UCLA month plus, they're going to go to Indiana, the state of Indiana, as an LA-based team 3 times. That's going to wear on this team. It will, whether it's some losses, come tournament time, maybe an early Big Ten exit. It will, as much as Cronin is learning how to rest, how to keep the energy up. UCLA can't be shell-shocked when Penn State comes to town, although I expect it. And then the trip coming up should not damper your hopes. It is just what's the log of the Big Ten season. You bring in Michigan State, they took their 2 L's on the West Coast, and UCLA is going to be dished out to the eastern side of the Big Ten, right? Even though there's Rutgers in Maryland, they already took those 2 L's in front of a raucous Illinois crowd, a raucous Indiana crowd, ready with just a scrappy Penn State team waiting to mess everything up in between all those. Still a huge win, a gritty win, one that they should not have lost and hopefully could have expanded the lead. But the physicality of Michigan State showcased, hey, we can attack UCLA's weakness, which is still the lack of rebounding and the lack of a true post presence, even with Mata's continual growth.
Kentucky ran into a buzzsaw. Let's just be honest.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That was the best first half of basketball Ole Miss has ever had in its history, I think. It was a situation, they scored 54 points. They shot 60% from the field. They had 0 turnovers, like 11 or 12 assists. It was a complete first half, and Kentucky dug themselves a hole that they just couldn't get out of. Ole Miss won 98-84, but Ole Miss in the second half got up 27 points and kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit. You could see the moment where the defensive intensity kind of dropped down. Kentucky was able to kind of get into a little bit of a rhythm. And whenever that happened, Ole Miss kind of let Kentucky chip away at the lead. But make no mistake, Kentucky never got below 10 points in this game. This game was over at the 10-minute mark in the first half, essentially. But Ole Miss did to Kentucky what Kentucky normally does to Ole Miss. Let's be real about this. And this is why this game is special. If Ole Miss won 95 times in a row, the series would be tied. So celebrate this win. The 98 points, that's the most points that Ole Miss has ever scored against the Kentucky basketball team. This is the 15th win in the series history against Kentucky. Celebrate this win. Ole Miss doesn't take Kentucky apart like this. They just don't. In their history, they do not do this. So enjoy this. This was fantastic. And it was nice that it seemed like such an ass whooping that happened in the first half of that game, to where it just didn't matter what Kentucky did. Ole Miss was just going to win that game, and they were going to win it going away. I'm very excited. In this game, it was Matthew Morrell showed up for the first time in a while. He looked like his old self, even dunked one time in the game. Ended up over 20 points, had an amazing hot shooting start in the first half that kind of propelled Ole Miss to that big lead. I think they got up 23 points at halftime as part of them scoring 54 points. Ole Miss didn't quite break 100, but 98 will have to do. Juju Murray, double-double in the game. Not the way you would think, but he had 15 points. He had 10 assists. Sean Padula had 8 points and 8 assists. He almost went double-double as well. And for the game, Ole Miss had 24 assists and only 1 turnover. Ole Miss dominated this game. Now, I realize that Kentucky is defensively challenged. They are. It's kind of sad to see a Kentucky basketball team this bad at playing defense. You're not really used to seeing that. You used to see games to where Kentucky needed a run or something like that, and they turn up the defensive intensity and everything and just out-athlete you. That is what would happen. But this game is almost like there is no third gear on the Kentucky defense, and you're going to have open looks at the baskets. And if you can make shots, you will take them apart. Kentucky actually shot the ball fairly well in this game. We'll talk about that in a little bit when we're going over the box score, but they shot 50% for the game, nearly 50% from three. They struggled a little bit at the free throw line, but I mean, that didn't matter with the score being what it was. Ole Miss just completely dominated this game against the Kentucky Wildcats. Big Blue obviously did not recover from the loss they took to Calipari over the weekend. That affected their program to the point where the players came out in the first half sluggish. Ole Miss came out on a mission, and whenever gasoline meets fire, it happens. Like I said, Ole Miss fans have seen this game in reverse in Rupp Arena more times than we can count. I remember one time, and I'm going to really date myself, but this is sometime I think in the 90s. I think Joe Harvell was playing for Ole Miss at that time. I thought Ole Miss was going to get up there and do pretty well. I had decent expectations. It wasn't a tournament team, but I thought it was going to be a competitive game, and it was like 47-10 at halftime. We've seen this game on the reverse side. So respect to Kentucky, respect for what they did, but Ole Miss completely outclassed and dominated Kentucky tonight. And Ole Miss fans need to enjoy that. They need to look at this and just put a marker down as like, we did that. All right, so let's look at the box score in this game real quick. Ole Miss beat Kentucky 98-84. Ole Miss shot 54.7% from the field. They were up over 60% in the first half. It was absolutely insane. Kentucky shot 50%. See, they actually shot pretty well. They were 10-21 on three-point shots. Ole Miss was 13-30. They kind of went cold at the end of the game, but it became a free throw shooting contest at that point, so it didn't matter. Ole Miss only had 1 turnover to Kentucky's 8. Kentucky out-rebounded Ole Miss 37-29. It was less than that magic 10 number, and Ole Miss was able to kind of take it apart. In the first half, they played them pretty well even. Kentucky was able to chip down on the lead, and they got the rebound advantage whenever that happened. Ole Miss had 14 fouls, Kentucky 16. Malik Dia had 16 points, 4 rebounds. Sean Padula, 3 rebounds, 8 assists, 8 points. Matthew Morrell had 24 and 5 rebounds with 3 assists and a steal. Dre Davis had 17 points. We always talked about Dre Davis needing to step up. He had a big game today for Ole Miss. Had 3 rebounds as well, some clutch shots. His fadeaway jump shot from the elbow in the lane is pretty nice. Jalen Murray, again, 15 points, 10 assists, 3 rebounds. Pretty great day for Jalen Murray. He shot 3 for 5 from foul line. That's kind of out of character for him, but 2 for 4 from 3 and overall 5 of 7. Michael Brown-Jones had 2 points. Jamin Brakefield had 10. That was all in the first half whenever this was going pretty quick. Davin Barnes had 6 points. Ole Miss 98 points, 71% from the line, 43% from three-point range, 54.7, like I said, from two-point range. Kentucky had 84 points. They shot pretty well. They were led by Otega Owe, 24 points. Amari Williams had 12. Jackson Robinson, 18. Really good shooter, that kid. Kobe Bray had 10 points as well. Andrew Carr had 10 points. They had 5 players in double figures. Both teams had 5 players in double figures, and Ole Miss almost had 6. So that, I think that was pretty cool and something to kind of hang your hat on as well. So we'll see how that looks for it. All right, whenever in the third segment, we're going to have a longer third segment and get your comments on the board. Remember to put where you're commenting from and your name. If it is not clear in your username, I'd like to know who's commenting and where they're commenting from. That's just what we like to do. But it's a big day for Ole Miss basketball. And we need to talk about Ole Miss is now at 6 wins in the Southeastern Conference, another quad 1 level win. And you have a case coming up. You have a road game at LSU, which honestly, Ole Miss should probably win that game. If you do look, it's hard to win on the road, but as far as a talent advantage, that's a winnable game. Road game at South Carolina, that's a winnable game. Road game at Vanderbilt, that's a winnable game. You have Auburn on the list and you have Mississippi State at home. You're entering a stretch to where Ole Miss can make some noise. And if you want to position yourself to make a run in the NCAA basketball tournament, the next 4 or 5 games is where that's going to happen. If Ole Miss wins 3 or 4 of them, something like that, and they end up at 10 wins with the last 5 games on their schedule left to go, just kind of free shots for everybody, you might find yourself as a 4 or a 3 seed very high in the Southeastern Conference. I mean, you have a lot of stuff. Remember, this team can go far in the NCAA tournament. Don't let anybody tell you they can't, but it's going to be matchup dependent. This team isn't at the point where they can just line up and play against any style and dominate. This isn't that team. But you get into a bracket to where it just kind of all lines up, good matchup after good matchup. Yeah, this is a second weekend type of team, if that happens. But if you get into a situation to where the matchup is not favorable to Ole Miss, could be a one and done weekend team. So it could go either way. The point is, this is going to be fun if you think about it. This is going to be real fun. That Ole Miss can be in a position to where you are actively rooting one way and you can think of high hopes. You don't have the pressure of an Auburn, because Auburn's going to go into the NCAA basketball tournament, national championship or bust. If they have another Yale, it's going to be a disaster. Ole Miss, house money. If you can make it to the Sweet 16, this team can make it to the Sweet 16, which is the best finish ever in Ole Miss's basketball history. If Ole Miss does that, I mean, think about what that would do for the program. You already have electric atmospheres that are happening pretty consistently at the Pavilion. And if Ole Miss strings together some wins, if they figure out a way to beat LSU, figure out a way to beat Carolina and Mississippi State, go on a little bit of a winning streak, and you're sitting here at like 9-4 in the Southeastern Conference, then it's just house money at the end of it. And you're just playing for seeding at that point. And it'll be interesting to see how Ole Miss does.
Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in Super Bowl bets, that's icing on the cake. And the $5, you could go to the point spread on the Super Bowl. FanDuel has it close right now. Chiefs slightly favored. Kansas City laying 1.5 against Philadelphia this Sunday. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
Trading for Myles Garrett or Cooper Kupp.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast.
The pursuit or potential pursuit of a couple of big names that are set to hit the trade market, or at least for teams to hear out some trade offers from other teams. Edge rusher Myles Garrett, as well as wide receiver Cooper Kupp. Now, if you haven't seen this, I'll explain why both of these guys are considered to potentially be on the move here soon. But let me tell you first that the pursuit of Myles Garrett, I feel like, would be
an empty one if you're the New Orleans Saints. You don't really have the draft capital to give up for him. You don't really have the money to pay him or to help to move him. But wide receiver Cooper Kupp could be a name that the New Orleans Saints could be and should be willing to check in on at the right price, and if the Rams are willing to do the right thing to help it all happen. And both of those boxes may actually be checked. So here's the deal. Myles Garrett has asked for a trade, says that he wants to win a championship, but doesn't believe that he's going to be able to do that in Cleveland. And so from Cleveland to Canton, he wants his opportunity to get out and get to a contender. So I would expect teams like the Detroit Lions, team like the two teams we're about to watch this weekend, the Philadelphia Eagles, as well as the Kansas City Chiefs, well, I know that they're within the division, so very unlikely, but I would expect at least for the Baltimore Ravens to check in and see, hey, what would it cost, including the in-division tax. But it's not a place that I see the New Orleans Saints going. However, I could see the New Orleans Saints at least checking in on Cooper Kupp. And you might say, well, Ross, he's got a $20+ million cap hit in 2025, $20+ million cap hit in 2026. He's not as good as he once was. He's not the Cooper Kupp that caught 140, plus receptions a few years ago. He's not that guy. He didn't look great up against or for Los Angeles last year. I get all that. I truly do. I really, really understand that. Like, you look at Cooper Kupp's numbers as a receiver and you can see everything kind of falling off and everything throughout the seasons. You're probably trading for a guy you're going to get 12 games out of, but are those 12 games enough to make it worth it? I mean, you look at over the course of the past few years when it comes to what it is that he's been doing, and he's still been somebody that the team has relied upon, the team has looked to get the ball to. He just hasn't had the same level of production. In 2021, he led the league with 145 receptions and nearly cracked 2,000 receiving yards at 1947. And since then, 812 receiving yards, 737 receiving yards, 710 receiving yards, having played just 12 games in 12 games in 2023 and 2024, 9 games in 2022. After that incredible 2021 season, in which he played all 17 games, was targeted a whopping 191 times in the process. So you're not moving for a Cooper Kupp to try to get 2021 Cooper Kupp. You're moving for a Cooper Kupp in order to get a do-it-all dirty work wide receiver 2, a Traquan Smith with much more value and upside. And honestly, you're trying to get somebody like Cooper Kupp because he's absolutely, and I'm just going to say it this way, peeved when it comes to how things have been handled with him and the Los Angeles Rams. He said basically that he always wanted to be in LA. He wanted to stay in LA. He wanted to finish his career in LA. And that he's basically going to bring a lot of heat now if he does and as he does get moved. Now, he's not asking for a trade, but he was basically taking to social media and the Notes app announcing that the expectation is that he will be traded by the Los Angeles Rams. So this feels like more of a team decision than his. In fact, in his note, he even said that he doesn't want it. Like, it's not him. He doesn't want to be traded. He wants to stay in Los Angeles. And so if he does indeed go on the move, he would only go on the move for about a day 3 pick. And at the most, you're hoping and you're expecting, and in fact, according to reports, the Rams are willing to do this. They're willing to pick up some of his salary and some of his cap number. So if he's able to, or if they're able to pick up some of his base salary and then move him, and you're still able to move him for a 4th round pick at most, a 6th or a 7th round pick after. Otherwise, I'm just looking at the New Orleans Saints picks. They have no 5th round pick. I think it could be worth the move if they're gonna foot the bill. And if all it's going to cost you is a day 3 pick, then yeah, make a move for a Cooper Kupp. If nothing else, it gives you a veteran, an actual veteran in the wide receiver room that can help guys like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed. That's not a redundant talent to Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed as a speedy deep threat. He gives you somebody that's going to be able to operate in the short area, in the intermediate area, gives you a 3rd and 2 passing option, gives you a 1st and 10 or 2nd and 10 passing option to get it to 2nd and 5 or 3rd and 5. He gives you all of that. You're not looking for Cooper Kupp to come somewhere and be a superstar. That's why you're only giving up a day 3 pick to get him. And so here's the way that I would do this. If I'm the New Orleans Saints, I'm monitoring the situation. If he gets traded before the draft, then he gets traded before the draft. Totally fine. That's likely to happen as teams are going to want to get him in, figure out how much of the salary cap the Rams are willing to pick up and how that impacts their free agency class and all those other things. So I would expect him to probably be moved early. And if he gets moved early, c'est la vie, right? So be it. He gets moved early, totally fine. But if he's still on the roster and they're not looking to move him until the draft, then what I would do if I'm the New Orleans Saints is wait to see what day 1 and day 2 looks like when you're on the board. If you don't walk away with a wide receiver with your first round pick, your second round pick, or either of your either of your third round picks, my apologies, and you didn't go out and sign a different wide receiver in free agency, I'd start working the phones with my second, fourth round pick. And if they're not interested in that, then I'd be looking at, or I guess they would be interested in that, but I'd be shopping that 6th round pick. Then if they're not interested in that, then I'd be willing to move my second, 4th round pick. Because you think about the wide receivers you could potentially get in the 4th round, you're probably picking somebody for 12 games worth of time, right? Not necessarily 12 games, but 12 games worth of snaps. And you're probably looking for somebody that might come in and you're still hoping to translate to the NFL. Remember, you've got a Bub Means that's working to do that, all those other things. So you don't have to go the redundant route. And say, go and get somebody that's proven in the NFL. Go and get somebody that's able to mentor your young wide receivers and all of those things. So that's where I would look at the potential of going after a Cooper Kupp. If he gets moved before that, he gets moved before that. If they're not interested in moving him to somebody within the conference, they're not interested in moving him to somewhere near inside the conference, totally fine. No love lost, no loss when you're not giving up anything. But that's kind of the way that I would play this. Is it unlikely? Yes. Is it worth at least looking into? Yes. And is a trade for Cooper Kupp far more likely than a trade for Myles Garrett? Absolutely, especially as the Rams are looking to pick up the bill. And of course, Cooper Kupp's 2026 base salary, over $14 million, but $0 of it is guaranteed. So you can move off with a clean cut right after one season. So you'll be able to use a day 3 pick for a 1-year rental on a physical receiver that can block and that can give you another physical option as a pass catcher, and then bang, you're right out from under it in 2026. It's a way that the New Orleans Saints could potentially go.
I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, comedy. How about a Broadway show? Can't wait to take my kids to Broadway. The energy, the excitement, it's unforgettable. Seeing live performers, it's the best. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Curation makes it easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more near you. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first ticket purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Just how close are the Packers to the Philadelphia Eagles?
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast.
Super Bowl 59 in New Orleans. Our pal Carmen Vitale from Fox Sports joins me now. Good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
This is my favorite thing because it's like camp people I don't see in person.
Yes,
I see
true.
once a year, every year.
Yes.
So here we are, and the Packers aren't here.
No.
Which is kind of a bummer. But the Lions aren't here.
I know. None of the NFC North teams are.
None of those NFC North teams.
I know. One and done for all of them.
Did we just wildly overrate this division, or what happened?
I don't know, honestly. I mean, I don't think we overrated the division because this division is still going to be extremely competitive going forward, and the Bears are now hoping to add to that with the Ben Johnson splash hiring. I think a huge reason why the Bears did finally do something that they've never done before is because they realize the rest of the teams in this division are set up to not only be successful now, but down the road. I mean, all of these teams have longevity, stability. They have guys under team control for multiple years, like cornerstones under team control for multiple years. So I think the Bears are just finally like, oh God, we got to do something because it's not going to get easier anytime soon.
The Lions, though, Aaron Glenn is out. He's in New York now. Ben Johnson in the division, which my pal Matt Derry over at Locked On Lions not super happy about. We were like, we need to manifest him to Jacksonville or to Las Vegas. That did not happen.
No, it didn't.
But to what degree would you be worried from a Lions perspective that there's this brain drain phenomenon here?
It was interesting because Ben Johnson said it at his press conference where he was like, honestly, the structure of everything is built. The runway is there already in Detroit, that it doesn't even really matter who the coordinator is, which I also thought was kind of like petty on his part.
Yeah.
But it was basically just saying, I mean, with all the talent they have, and not only the fact that they've developed their own players, but Dan Campbell and his staff have been able to develop coaches. You see guys like Kelvin Shepard getting the DC job, getting promoted. You've seen multiple guys now moving up kind of in those ranks and then pulling from other places. They just landed Casey Rogers from the Buccaneers for their D-line coach.
Someone the Packers wanted a lot.
Yes, he had offers from multiple teams, and pretty much every team in the NFC North, and chose the Lions because he believes in what they're doing and how to kind of they're
coached with Dan Campbell too.
Yes, he did. So there's all of this that I'm not worried about the Lions because, again, the roster is constructed in a way that they have guys like Aiden Hutchinson under team control till 2026, Jahmyr Gibbs till 2027. So like stuff like that where it really, not that it doesn't take a crazy person to be able to get those guys going, but you have all that talent and it makes your job really easy as a coach.
It does, although we've seen the difference. I mean, we talked to Louis DiBiase from Locked On Eagles about the gap in talent from last year to this year, not huge, but then they had Vic Fangio. And he's a force multiplier. Like that coaching piece can be really, really big. Dan Campbell built this incredible staff. There's no guarantee he can replace it to the same level.
No, there's not.
But we have seen like Sean McVay, he just like keeps finding, I don't know where he keeps finding these guys from. Unbelievable that they're able to do this. The Packers starting to run into this a little bit. Jeff Hafley loses Anthony Campanile, Derek Ainsley, interviews over in Atlanta. What did you think as this Packers team was trying to revamp on the fly with the coaching piece of this with Jeff Hafley? What did you make of what you saw from them this year?
Honestly, I was very impressed with how much taking the ball away masked, kind of the early bumps in the road, right? Like you weren't getting pressure. There just wasn't that formidable front seven, D-line, all that kind of stuff getting to the quarterback.
They expected to.
Which they expected to, but at the same time, you had a guy like Xavier McKinney who we knew was going to make this whole thing go under Jeff Hafley because safeties are the most important position in his scheme. And you saw the takeaways kind of mask all of these issues so that down the stretch, like towards the back end of the season, they were getting pressure. They were starting to figure it out. They were starting to affect the quarterback, and like better than most teams. In fact, I believe they were top 5 in pressure percentage for the last like 6 weeks of the season or so. And so they went into the postseason where you felt like they were a complete team, which is why it made it such a shock that they were one and done in the postseason, because you really felt like, all right, this team, Jordan, but none of them played their best. And I think that was the main issue here. And you need more out of guys on that front. I do think that there is something to changing schemes, especially when that scheme has been in Green Bay for 15 years. You go from a 3-4 to a 4-3 for the first time in forever. And your roster has, for generations now, been built to accommodate a 3-4. And that's why you saw Preston Smith go at the trade deadline. That's why it was so much of this season, I think, for Jeff Hafley was just figuring out his personnel, which guys could make the jump, which guys they needed to get rid of, who they now need. And I really do think that they're going to figure it out. You need to give these guys time. We want results like right then and there, but when you're switching over an entire scheme, an entire staff, all of that kind of stuff, it just takes a little bit of time.
Look at Edgerrin Cooper. I mean, the first half of the year, he's making splash plays here and there. In the second half, he's like the best linebacker in the NFL. So it's funny. We were here last year, not here, but at Super Bowl. And everyone that I talked to was like, Jordan Love, huh? And then this year it's sort of like Jordan Love, huh? and I don't know what to make of that. What was different this year to you? I mean, why weren't they able to take that jump to your mind?
Yeah, I really do think that the injury had a lot to do with it, because we know these guys too, and Jordan Love too as well. He's no exception. He's going to downplay absolutely everything, and he's going to say, I mean, this is the same team where Aaron Rodgers talked about like, oh, the thumb injury is no big deal, and his last season in Green Bay, and that was clearly an issue for him. So I think there's like, and that's the culture at so many different places, is like, no, downplay it, it's no big deal. I do think that the injuries were a huge deal, and especially like the stop-start of it all, where it took for like a really long time to even get into a rhythm, and that there's something to that. And especially then, even when Jordan Love would get into the rhythm after playing a few games, then Christian Watson would go out, Romeo Doubs was out, Jaden Reed goes out, right? Like you had so many guys in and out of the lineup that you just weren't operating at your full extent. And I think that there's something to be said there for staffing, for development, all of that kind of stuff, where you need to kind of figure out a workaround. But I do think that Matt LaFleur is so good at in-game adjustments, at adjustments throughout the season. You saw those guys before and after their bye week, and it was night and day on both sides of the ball. And I think that's not a coincidence. That's Matt LaFleur making adjustments, but you just don't necessarily have the opportunity to do that on a week-to-week basis and you can take advantage of it when you do have those 2 weeks off or whatever, 2 weeks.
Do they need to make a big move?
I don't think so, because they're the Packers. Like, it was crazy to see them do the Josh Jacobs move. It was crazy to see them do the Xavier McKinney move. And on the other side of it, it all really does make sense because you wanted the run game for Jordan Love to be able to rely on that now that Aaron Jones was gone. Yeah. You knew that you needed a dude at safety to run Jeff Hafley's scheme. But now when you're not going through any of that drastic turnover, changing a quarterback, changing a defensive coordinator, I think you just let the guys gel and you do what this organization has done for years and decades and generations of you draft really well, you bring them up through the Green Bay way, and it ends up working out.
Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in Super Bowl bets, that's icing on the cake. And the $5, you could go to the point spread on the Super Bowl. FanDuel has it close right now. Chiefs slightly favored. Kansas City laying 1.5 against Philadelphia this Sunday. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, guys, here in New Orleans, joined by PFF's Trevor Sycamore, buddy. I always appreciate you making time to speak with me. Good to see you. As always, got to talk about the Washington Commanders here.
Yeah.
And I really want to bring you on because I love your team building conversations. Mm-hmm. And we always talk about what phase or what stage is a team in their building process.
Right.
Now, obviously, the Commanders entered 2024, rebuild, retool, recalibration, however, whatever word you want to use there.
Yeah.
But now, NFC Championship game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They got 30 expiring contracts.
Yeah.
They got a good amount of draft picks, a ton of cap space. Where do you see this team? Like, what phase is this team in for you?
Yeah, ahead of schedule for sure. You have to believe the winning window is open, right? I mean, and that's what it's all about, getting to that legitimate winning window. And even though I think they're going to go through a lot of changes still on the roster, I mean, it was year one of them retooling, reshaping, getting Ron Rivera's guys, phasing some of those guys out, getting a lot more Dan Quinn guys in the building. We knew it was going to, that part of the process is going to continue still. Yeah. But now you go forward thinking, okay, we probably bought ourselves an extra year of the winning window. Because normally a winning window in the NFL is 3-4 years if you do it correctly. They're probably hoping that this past year felt like one of those wins, and it was a bonus maybe fifth year, and you hope that, okay, now we're in it, and you hope that, even a year from now, it's truly, the window is wide open and you're thinking about a Super Bowl. You really are.
Yeah, absolutely. So now the question is, how hard do they go after it, right?
Right.
Guys like Myles Garrett requested a trade. I know the Browns are saying, but we've heard teams say that before.
Right.
Cooper Kupp. I mean, this one, the team is just saying, hey, thanks for everything, bro. Good luck with your next step.
Yeah.
So I want to start with Myles. This team, they want to be aggressive on defense. They want to hunt the football, hunt the quarterback. I think the fit is pretty clear.
Yes.
If you're Washington, given how many openings you have, where you are in this process, what are you willing to give up to try to go get a guy like Myles Garrett?
I think it's probably going to cost at least, this is my thought and estimated guess, as we are a couple of days after Myles Garrett announcing that he's requesting a trade.
Yeah.
I think it's going to cost at least 2 first-round picks and probably something else. Either a player, maybe another second-round pick on top of that, because you got to realize, there's a lot of things that go into the price being that high. One, Myles Garrett's unbelievable. He's one of the best defensive players in the world, in the prime of his career still. I believe that. He's got a pretty cap-friendly contract for how good of a player he is. And then also, it would take some cap gymnastics for Cleveland to even be able to trade him. And when a star player announces that he wants to be out, I don't think this is just willy-nilly, didn't really think about it. Okay, let me talk to ownership. He's already talked to ownership. Remember, he talked about this not too long ago where he said, I don't want to be a part of a rebuild.
Right.
And he's then talked to ownership. He's talked to Andrew Berry. He's talked to Kevin Stefanski, and yet he still did this.
Yep.
So unless this is just a give me more money and a contract extension move from him, I think they figure out a way to trade him.
Yeah.
But it has to be still worth it for them. And the leverage would then come from basically every team in the NFL would want Myles Garrett.
Right.
So to me, it's going to be a pick of at least 2 first-round picks because Cleveland's going to want that flexibility of next year's draft to want to go up and get a quarterback because I don't think they're going to take one in this year's draft. So they're going to want that ammo and that flexibility. And then obviously, if you're trading away Myles Garrett, you're tearing it down to the studs.
Right.
You're tearing the whole roster down, ultimate rebuild. All that to say, the price tag's worth it for Washington. To me, the price tag is 100% worth it to Washington because it's not just about getting a player of Myles Garrett's caliber. You also have to realize where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Free agents are going to want to play with Jaden Daniels.
Yep.
Free agents are going to want to play with Dan Quinn. So, yes, you'll have less premium draft picks to acquire some of these players. But I think Washington will be in a unique spot where they will be able to entice and lure some of these good players to maybe sign for a little bit less than they would maybe sign somewhere else or something like that. So that is why I don't know if I'd pay this price for every team, but I would pay it if I'm Washington.
No, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a steep price, but, as I just covered on my show, like, I think if it brings in the right production, I mean, you can absolutely justify it. Like you said, I mean, we got to watch that firsthand with Tom Brady coming to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and how many people wanted to come up. And I don't know, maybe Chris Godwin, maybe he's willing to take a little bit of a pay cut to come to Washington. I don't know, Trevor. I don't know. A lot of Bucs fans would not be happy with me if that happened. But let's get to Cooper Kupp.
Okay.
So Terry McLaurin's under contract. Not a lot of other receivers under contract for the Washington Commanders. Luke McCaffrey, the developmental project there in Washington. I can't get over the $20 million. You know what I mean? Like they trade for him. And I know things can be worked out. You can tack on some void years, add some new years. Where do you stand on Washington maybe being in on a guy like Cooper Kupp?
I think it's a fit, right? Yeah. I think I would like the fit. I don't love that price tag as much for a team like Washington.
Yeah.
To me, if you're going to go all in on that kind of money, you're probably thinking of doing it for a wide receiver that, they were in the Brandon Ayuk conversation last year, right?
Yep.
Ayuk's more worth it to me because not only are you trading for a guy that is a legitimate wide receiver one, right? And that's including a roster that has Terry McLaurin in it. So if you want to say like, no, Terry McLaurin's still the wide receiver one and Brandon Ayuk's the wide receiver two, he's probably the best wide receiver two in the NFL at that point, right? So that's a situation where whoever you have one or two, it's worth it for you. Kupp, he's getting up there in age. You're gonna have to pay the salary cap. You're gonna have to pay the draft pick to get him. In a vacuum, I'd love to fit.
Yeah.
But I don't love that trade-off for Washington nearly as much. So I think if they made this move, it would be hard for me to criticize it because it would make the team better. But I'd probably be a little bit cooler on that one if I was Washington.
So you heard it from me already. Now you heard it from Trevor Sigma. So if you disagree, that's fine. But I'm just saying you got two, at least one smart person. One maybe. I've been paid long enough to think I'm smart.
You're a smart
person.
Come on,
you gotta get it.
I mean,
I appreciate it.
I mean, you talking about Chris Godwin leaving wasn't smart. But that's from a guy who's handled his Tampa Bay trade. So
yeah, absolutely. So we got to talk draft, right? But I want to talk about the last draft first, Jaden Daniels.
Okay.
I mean, how much did you believe in him as a franchise quarterback potentially coming in? Again, it's only been 1 year.
Yeah.
Travis Kelce just said it, like 1 year is great. You got to do it another year.
Sure.
But how much did you believe in him? Go back into draft season of last year. And how much did he exceed your expectations this season?
Yeah, so I had him ranked 21st overall on my big board. I had him as QB3 in last year's draft. I had him behind Caleb Williams. I had him behind Drake May, who had his 1 and 2 in the class. And when I look at Jaden, I didn't doubt the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered if we would hit it. Because you look at what he was able to do at LSU, incredibly productive. Don't mean to take anything away from him. But let's face it. 1, it's college. You're going up against college defenses.
Right. 2,
you're throwing him Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Not bad, right? I mean, it's a pretty good situation to be in. And so I just wondered, is it going to be that easy at the NFL level for him? And the crazy thing is, it was easier. He was better as a rookie than he was at LSU, which is crazy to think. And so you got to give him so much props for that. The way that he was able to play with so much confidence in a rookie season. To me, we've done some exercises, some way too early redrafts, right? I mean, we did this over on the NFL Stock Exchange show. Connor Rogers, my co-host, and I did it. And of course, the big question of a redraft is, what do you do at 1? You're Chicago.
Yeah.
And both of us agreed, you take Jaden.
Yeah.
And it's not that we don't believe in Caleb.
Right.
But everybody can look at arm talent. Everybody can look at, all right, how you manage the game, what your overall ceiling is. But the thing is, confidence is the least guaranteed thing.
Mm-hmm.
Look at a guy like Jamarcus Russell, right? I mean, like, this is just one example of, I feel like, so many of quarterbacks, all the talent in the world. And yeah, some things go on behind the scenes outside of football. I understand that. But all of that goes into the confidence you have playing the game. And the fact that Jaden was able to be this confident as a rookie, you take that all day, especially given the fact that he's got franchise caliber talent on top of it. So I had him 21st. I was lower on him. I had him at QB3, but it wasn't any sort of like, I didn't believe in the ceiling. I just wondered if we would see it at the NFL level. And not only did we see it, we've already seen even better than what we saw at LSU.
No, I agree completely with everything you just said. So let's get to this year's draft, picking number 29 in the first round, 29th pick in the first round.
Yeah.
So a couple things they could use. They use pass rush help, run defense help, obviously.
Yeah.
Could use another corner, right? If they move Mikey Sanderson back inside, need another perimeter guy.
Right.
If they keep Mikey outside, they need a slot guy.
Right.
Some people want running back. I don't know if first round's too early. Some people want a second receiver. O-line upgrades. Where are the Commanders most likely to get one of the, I mean, it's a pretty wide berth, right?
Yeah.
Where are they most likely to get like a blue chip if there is one that late in this first round?
Blue chip's tough at 29, but it does feel like the sweet spot for this draft of where they're picking edge and corner.
Okay.
Like I can just think, using the PFF mock draft simulator, a lot of times when I'm picking for Washington at the back end of the first round, a cornerback like Trey Amos from Ole Miss, a cornerback like Siobhan Revelle from East Carolina. Like, I think both of those guys would be fantastic for them. Sometimes Jahdae Barron from Texas can make it to them at the back end of the first round. And then when you look at edge rushers, it's a Jack Sawyer from Ohio State, his teammate JT Tuimoloau. If you want more of a stand-up pass rusher, a Donovan Izaraku type of player. And so, like, there's a lot of different options that they could go with at corner or edge at the back end of the first round. That's typically where I gravitate towards. I'd love another wide receiver, but I'm trying to think of a wide receiver that would be, if a Luther Burden were to fall to them at the back end of the first round, that I think you consider. But outside of Tetro McMillan or Luther Burden, even for as much as I love Emeka Egbuka, I love Matthew Golden, like I love those dudes, I don't know if I'd pick one of those wide receivers over one of the edge rushers that I think will be left for them. So edge rusher, corner are the two spots that I typically look at the back end of the first round.